What paranormal things did you experience in your childhood? Serious. My sister and I were playing with a Ouija board asking the all-important questions about boys we liked, etc. My father was in the room and scoffed that one of us was moving the planchette thing to spell out answers. So he asked us a question that we couldn't know the answer to. Ask it, what is Stubbs' middle name? We had a family friend who lived in another state, and although his given name was Robert, everyone called him Stub. As little kids we wouldn't have known his middle name. We asked and the planchette spelled out Emil. Emil was the right answer. My father made us immediately throw out the Ouija board. I was about 9 years old, playing with some Star Trek action figures in my bedroom. Yes, I was a cool kid. My room was positioned directly above a guest room which was almost never used, and I almost never entered. The furniture was outdated compared to the rest of the house, and it just had a creepy vibe. This will be relevant later. I had a Spock action figure which broke apart easily. His shirt would snap into 2 pieces by pressing on the seam, and then all his limbs would fall off. He was easy to repair, so I took him apart often. He'd be used for body parts if I wanted to pretend someone had been killed by an alien. One day, just as I had set up a decidedly gruesome Star Trek scene, my mom called me down for dinner. When I came back upstairs after eating, I noticed that Spock was gone. Just him, though. All the other action figures were still in a little circle exactly as I left them. I searched that night before bed, thinking my younger brother, my only sibling, who was 2 years old at the time, may have somehow gotten into my room and moved my stuff. It had never happened before, but it was all I could think of. The whole family was at dinner and there was no chance for anyone to go upstairs and move anything. The next morning, I searched the house for Spock. Nothing. Not put away. Not in my brother's room. Not in the living room. It was baffling. As a last-ditch effort, I decided to check the guest room. The room looked into shade, as usual, except for one thing: a dismantled Spock action figure, in the exact same position as I had left it in my room the night prior, directly below where I had been playing with him in my bedroom. I asked my mom and dad. They claimed to know nothing about it. My younger brother could not have made it down the stairs, and also would not have been able to make the same Spock pile that I had made the previous night. It was as if my toy had just translated a few feet in the Z direction, right through the floor. I still don't have an explanation. When I was 11, I was staying with some friends at their cabin deep in the woods in the middle of rural nowhere, like literally not another house for miles. We were playing soccer and my friend yelled and pointed to the trees behind the yard, and we all saw a man standing there in a dirty brown shirt and jeans, who walked towards us and vanished behind a tree. We screamed for their dad, and he came running out to see what was wrong and told us to go inside while he looked around. He found nothing, but we didn't want to go outside and play again. Later that night we had pretty much calmed down and were watching TV in their living room, which had big glass sliding doors facing the forest, when their dog started growling and barking at something outside the glass doors. He hadn't acted like this before. So we called their dad again, and he went outside through the doors and found nothing again. But the dog wouldn't stop barking until a few minutes later. I have no idea what the duck we saw, but I never went up with them again. I remember it so clearly. I would lose stuff completely inexplicably and get in trouble. My parents would tell me to find them, or else I would get punished. Then just before I got punished, I would randomly find those things in paranormal ways. For example, I would lose my scissors, and then there would be a sudden loud noise in the kitchen of pots and pans falling down. I would go investigate the kitchen and open the cupboard to find none of the pots been tipped over, and among the pots would be my scissors. Bizarre. My mom mentioned this to the wife of our pastor, who said that it was most likely an evil spirit that was trying to win my favor. The prayer group played for me, and this phenomenon stopped. I stopped inexplicably losing things and the weird reappearance, if those things also stopped. I had bunk beds with my brother as a kid, but we moved into a bigger house that allowed us to each have our own room. So we split them up. Mine was the top half, meaning I basically had 2 footboards and no headboard. The tops of the posts were flat and were about ear height on me if I sat on the edge of my bed. so I decided to put my stereo speakers pointing inward on them. I sat down dead center on the bed to listen to Motley Crue and leaned forward to rest my elbows on my knees and hold my head for a minute as I was just losing myself in the music. Then something heavy and sharp hit the top left back of my head hard enough that I started bleeding profusely. I leapt from my bed holding my scalp, blood dripping the whole way down the hall and stairs to my mother in the kitchen. She helped me get the bleeding under control and we went to the emergency room where the doctor stapled my scalp back together. When we got home from the emergency room, my mom and I went up to my bedroom to figure out what the heck happened. And one of the speakers, the one that had been on my right side, was on the floor in front of my bed with blood on one of the corners. There was no way it could have hit me in the head by just falling off the post. Never mind where and how hard it had hit me. We were never able to explain that one. And I had a hard time sleeping in that room for a while after it. A few years later the sconce on the wall started flickering, flashed green, and went out. That was probably just a weird bulb issue, but still freaky considering I was still in the haunted room that had tried to brain me. I woke up and saw a shadow man run then jump at me while I was in bed. I was so struck with fear I was unable to move, but he disappeared right before he landed. The memory was so terrifying I still remembered it nearly 30 years later. I only recently, like a month ago, discovered that this was a sleep paralysis demon. Same here. When I was in 2nd grade we lived in Maryland in a house that backed on some creepy woods. Woke up in the middle of the night lying on my back and saw 3 pairs of red eyes rising slowly upward, 1 pair rising on either side and 1 at the foot of the bed. When they reached full height about 6 feet their shadow forms coalesced around the red eyes. They just stood there for a long time staring down at me. I was completely and totally terrified. They say that when a person feels threatened they can fight, flight, or freeze, and I was definitely frozen and unable to move from sheer terror. The only thing I had the power to do was close my eyes. I did so for a long time, and when I opened them again they were gone. I'm 52 years old now, but remember this like it was yesterday. Over the years I was shocked to find that many other people have seen these beings all around the world. I have personally come to believe that they are multidimensional negative energies who feed off fear. Also, like sharks can sense blood in the water from a mile away, I think they can sense people or groups of people who are giving off a lot of negative energy, fear, hatred, stress, anger, etc. and tend to gravitate to those people. That is like a buffet to them. They came to me only one other time, when I was older. This time I faced them down, calmly getting out of bed and walking towards them. Before I reached them they disappeared. They have never returned. As a preventive I say the Lord's Prayer every night before going to sleep. I think that any positive loving prayer activity tends to keep them at bay and purifies the space you're in. My dad's house is built where the original house was flattened in a tornado. I slept upstairs. Next to my bed was a vent that you could see down into the basement if you looked over the edge of the bed. Sometimes I would wake up at like 3 AM. I'd look down and see the light was on in the basement. It's unfinished in the basement. All the bedrooms are on the main level. I'd go to the bathroom and the light in the basement would have turned off. Could be in my head, right? Same house. I had a lamp that would flash sometimes. It's a touch lamp so maybe it had issues. But it was a 3 brightness setting lamp. Each touch it would get brighter until the 4th touch it would turn off. I couldn't ever get the light to just flash once and turn off. No matter how fast I tapped it, it would take a second to register the next touch. So about 3 to 4 seconds to rifle through the 3 light setting to the off setting. It only flashed at night too. One night that really convinced me I wasn't imagining it all. My big stereo system when turned on would always start at a low sound level, even if you had it cranked up when you shut it off. About 3 AM one night the stereo turned on, full volume, while I was sound asleep. It was so loud it woke everyone up in the house. They came to my room and was like, WTF was that? After I woke up in total fear. Waking up to that loud radio to total darkness was a fear I never felt before and haven't felt since. That house was haunted, I think. My mom says that when I was 3 years old, I had an imaginary friend that made me do weird things if she said so. My mom thought nothing of it. until one night I woke up crying and screaming saying that my imaginary friend was hurting me and that it hurt way too much to bear it. I spent the whole night crying, and when I finally fell asleep and woke up in the morning I didn't remember anything, not even my imaginary friend. A few days later, my mother talked with the gardener and told him about what happened that night. It turns out that a girl with the same name of my imaginary friend used to live at the house. One day she disappeared and nobody knew anything about her. I don't remember anything of that till this day. I remember everything that happened when I was 3 years old except that experience. This story requires a small bit of setup. So my dad got 2 barns with our house, a big one and a little one. The big one was completely rotted out and beyond repair. The little one was savable. Anyway, on my 13th birthday my 2 best friends came over. It was about 1 AM and we were behind the small barn, doing some questionable things. When we stood back up we were running around whipping each other with our shirts, joking around, you know, normal stuff. Then about 30 minutes in my friend said, "What the heck is that?" pointing at the big barn. He had tried to scare us earlier, so I shrugged it off. But my other friend saw it too. It was a tall ass shadowy figure about 10 feet tall. We were all gawking at it when it looked like it started walking towards us. So we got the duck out of there and bolted for the house about 30 feet away. When we got back in we shrugged it off as an optical illusion or something casting a shadow. But when we looked there was nothing there that could have made a shadow. The scariest part was that we all saw it. The barn's gone now, and I'm still skeptical I saw something, but I never want to go out to the field where the barn was alone. Ever. While there are many, I'll speak of the scariest one. One night when my mom was sleeping over by someone else's house, I remember waking up in the middle of the night while everyone else in the house was asleep, grandmother and older sister, and I wanted some water, so I left my bedroom to go to the kitchen. The lights in the hallway at the time weren't working before someone forgot to replace the blown one, so I went to walk down the dark hallway when I just saw 2 reflexive eyes staring back at me, and at the time we didn't have a dog and we for sure don't allow pets to sleep inside the house. So naturally I stared at it and just went back in my room and slept on the bed with my older sister. This isn't even the only time that has happened in this house. I found a block of wood in the woods behind my grandparents' house as a kid. It had been imprinted with a license plate that read SXV4872. I remember making up a story where the license plate number was a secret code, so I remembered it 4 years after. A few years later, my parents got new license plates, and one of them was SXV4872. Not sure if that's paranormal, but it spooked me big time as a kid, and I have no explanation for it now. Sometimes I had nightmares, and the thing is I knew that it was a dream and I tried hard to wake myself up or shout, and I would feel like something was squeezing my chest and won't let me wake up. And I wake up suddenly, but sometimes they just reoccur if I sleep again. I don't know if anyone else has experienced it or not, but I really felt a presence. It still happens sometimes. That's sleep paralysis. I've had it happen on accident a few times, and it is terrifying. It's when your body thinks you're asleep, so your brain starts dreaming while still awake. I try to fend it off by moving a little when I feel it coming on, letting my brain know I'm still awake. I know that feeling of pressure on the chest. It feels very real, like there's ghost or something in the room causing it to happen. So my mom died when I was 9. My biological sister and I went to live with my aunt and uncle and their children and eventually adopted us. That being said, about a year after she died we all moved into a new house. The older girls all shared a room, so me and my 2 older adopted sisters. One night my oldest sister woke up and swore she saw my mom sitting over me rubbing my back and hair like she did to get me to sleep before getting sick. Did it really happen, or was it a dream she was having? Who knows, but it is definitely comforting even to this day. I also woke up one time shortly after getting pregnant, and I felt my mom's presence and saw feathers falling and a baby girl. I just felt reassured that I would be a good mom, and sure enough I have a 2.5-year-old baby girl who looks a lot like my mom. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.